Before we begin, take a deep breath and let the noise of the day slowly fade. Unclench your jaw, soften your eyes, and let the weight of modern life melt away. Tonight, we're not chasing action or drama. We're wandering into the forgotten corridors of boring history, where medieval echoes linger and dark tales unfold like fading ink on parchment. Welcome to Midnight Sleepless, a resting place for tired minds, with the Middle Ages, ancient empires, and strange, dark history. Stories drift by like soft clouds. Here, knights, castles, and quiet empires return not with a roar, but with a whisper. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? And if you enjoyed these slow, sleepy journeys through medieval times, boring facts, and forgotten worlds, a gentle tap on the subscribe button helps keep this calm storytelling alive. Now, let the story begin. The morning light, if it could be called that, came slowly through the canvas seams and weather-darkened folds of the Union Army's winter tents. Side, the pale breath of January hung in the trees like spiderwebs made of frost, clinging to the stripped limbs of sycamore and hickory. Inside the makeshift shelter, the air was dense with the smell of wool, damp leather, and last night's smoke. You are in Virginia, or perhaps Tennessee. It is early 1863, and the war has pressed on longer than anyone thought it might. The camp is still quiet, resting in the gray hush between sleep and duty. The soldier beside you stirs. His name may be unknown to history, but not to you not here in this moment. He stretches slowly, arms cocooned in a worn Federal issue blanket, the corners frayed by months of use. The cold bites gently at his cheeks and nose as he pushes the flap of the tent aside, allowing a soft shaft of light to settle on the packed earth floor. It's too early for orders, too late for dreams. The day begins not with urgency, but with the slow rhythm of habit buttons fastened with thick fingers, boots laced stiff with frost, and the creak of worn belts cinched tight over blue wool. Coats, there is no rush in this hour. The world beyond the trees still sleeps. A faint crackling sound drifts from somewhere near the quartermaster's leaned. Someone has coaxed a fire back to life. The soldier's breath puffs in front of him as he steps outside, joints stiff from the cold and the curled sleeping posture of the night. The ground beneath his feet crunches softly, a mix of old snow, dry pine needles, and frozen mud. Cross the clearing, other shapes begin to move, silhouettes rising slowly from tents, shoulders hunched, hands rubbing arms, boots scuffing paths through the frost. Sight gives way to scent as the first wisps of boiled coffee begin to rise from a shared tin pot hanging over embers that glow like tired eyes. The aroma is sharp, bitter, and familiar, comfort born of scarcity. The beans were pounded into near-death days ago with the butt of a musket, rationed carefully and brewed dark enough to wake the bones. No sugar, no milk, just the strong, earthy tang of resilience. The cup is passed from hand to hand, shared quietly, wordlessly, among those who will march together again soon. There is texture in everything, the canvas tents, still stiff with dew, the coarse wool of the soldiers, undershirt chafing his collarbone, the leather strap of his canteen creaking gently with each movement. A quiet ritual unfolds. Bad rolls are shaken loose and retied with practiced fingers. Cartridge boxes checked. Haversacks adjusted. Nothing is spoken unless necessary. These are gestures learned by repetition, like prayers said without thought. Each movement smoothing the mind like river stones in a current, somewhere not far off. Bugle begins its cold salt, clear and slow. Reveille, not a command, but a suggestion. It is time. Tess, and so the soldier turns toward the sound, face calm. Beneath his slouched cap, eyes unreadable. Not from fear, nor eagerness, simply a resignation born of rhythm. Today will be like the last, and the next, as long as the war stretches on. Still, as you listen to his breath and feel the warmth of tin against cold fingers, you may wonder, quietly, what did it feel like to wake each day this way, not knowing where the march would end? Was there comfort in the sameness, in the small tasks that carried weight only because they had to? The question does not need an answer. It can linger softly in the air, like morning fog between the trees. The morning has opened, not with thunder or haste, but with the slow breath of men accustomed to repetition. The soldier continues his routine with deliberate care. His coat is drawn closer around him, not just for warmth, but for familiarities. Fraying edges and patched elbows tell a quiet story of marches past, of campfires shared and letters read by flickering tallow light. The coat smells faintly of wood smoke, of old sweat, and of saddle soap rubbed into the collar to soften the wear. Each fold bears the imprint of long wear, and though regulation insists upon uniformity, every man's jacket has become his own, shaped by the wear of his days. He moves next toward the makeshift wash station, which is little more than a dented tin basin balanced on a crate near the cook's corner. The water, collected from a nearby stream, is cold enough to sting the skin. There is no mirror, only the reflection in a shallow puddle or the glint of a mess tin to catch his face. He wipes a cloth across his cheeks, over chin and brow. Each stroke wakens the nerves in slow pulses. Around him, others do the same, some shaving with care, others scrubbing hands and forearms with lye soap until the cold bites too deeply. There is very little talk, The sounds are simple: metal against tin, water poured from canteens, the rustle of wool sleeves. Now comes the tending of boots, mud-caked, cracked, soles worn thin from the long marches over gravel roads and frozen ground. The soldier takes his time, working grease into the leather with his fingers, pausing to thread a broken lace with a length of waxed cord. His boots are not well fitted. They never were, but they are his, and he knows the way they bend and bite, the way they creak at the heel and pinch the arch on colder days. Slipping them on, he stands again, rolling his shoulders gently to settle the weight of his belt and cartridge box. Nearby, the cook stirs a second pot, this one thicker cornmeal. Mush, most likely, with bits of salt pork boiled down to grayish specks. The scent is plain but not unpleasant. It smells of salt, of earth, and of smoke. Cups and dented spoons pass between gloved hands. The men eat, standing or squatting, speaking only when necessary. If someone hums a slow tune from Ohio or Pennsylvania, drifting through the steam. Another soldier jots notes in a small, worn diary, pausing between bites. These tiny movements, repeated across camps throughout the country, form the quiet rhythm of wartime mornings. Rare moments where time slows before orders are barked and boots fall in line, as the sun begins to rise no more than a pale smudge. In the cold sky, the soldier glances toward the edge of camp, where a mule team trudges in, breath huffing in clouds. A sutler wagon creaks behind them, weighed down with supplies, tobacco twists, paper, socks, and buttons. The wagon's canvas bears the name of a man who has followed the army for months, selling goods for inflated prices, but welcomed all the same. Coins jingle quietly. A few soldiers shuffle over to examine the offerings: rough paper for letters, peppermints, a tin of balm for cracked lips. The sensory world here is not silent, but muted. Every detail unfolds softly. The feel, of course, wool against skin. The warm sting of strong coffee on an empty stomach. The rough edge of a spoon scraped against the side of a tin cup. Even the voices, when they come, are low and steady accents, mingling from farm country and coastal towns. From the hills of Appalachia to the shores of Lake Erie, this is a place where time feels suspended, where each morning is both the same and slightly changed. The soldier steps toward the edge of camp to relieve himself behind a line of stunted trees. The ground is frozen and uneven. His breath clouds before him, and beyond the ridge, The faint sound of a drummer's slow warm-up reaches his ears. The drum beat does not stir fear or urgency. It is simply part of the pattern. As he returns, he notices a crow perched on a low branch, feathers puffed for warmth. The bird watches silently, tilting its head, unbothered. There is time, still, before the day's orders arrive. Time to mend a sock, to tighten the stitching on a shoulder strap, or to sit quietly with a pencil and write home, though the paper is scarce and the words are few. Some soldiers carry Bibles or small volumes of poetry, the pages stained with grease and rain. The soldier pulls one such book from his haversack, thumb resting on a dog-eared page. He doesn't read it aloud. Instead, he traces the line with his eyes, mouthing the words in silence as a way to mark the morning. And still, there remains no hurry. The minutes stretch like the shadows on the frozen ground, long and soft, barely moving. A few men speak of rumors, changes in command, possible orders, or supply wagons delayed. But such talk carries little urgency. For now, the only truth is the warmth of his coat, the heaviness of boots on gravel, and the taste of ash in the back of his throat from the morning fire. The soldier sits again on a stump, back slightly hunched, hands tucked under his arms. The sky has begun to lighten, revealing the faint blue of a winter morning stretched thin across the sky. He watches his breath rise and disappear. No thoughts press urgently on his mind. There is only the day ahead and the quiet knowledge that it begins, as always, with waiting. And in this stillness, you might wonder, was there peace in the waiting? Could the weight of boredom, of still repetition, become its own kind of refuge? In a world unraveling just beyond the tree line, perhaps the answer need not arrive swiftly. It can rest gently like frost on canvas, waiting for the sun to stir it away. The camp has now fully awakened, though the mood remains subdued, more like a slow unfolding than an abrupt beginning. The soldier rises from his seat, brushing a trace of sawdust from his trouser leg, and walks toward the supply line where his regiment gathers. There is no urgency in his step. Orders will come soon, perhaps a drill, perhaps latrine duty, perhaps a march postponed again. For now, he takes his place with the quiet dignity that forms in men when routine becomes their only compass. He adjusts the strap of his cartridge box and lets his fingers trail across the smooth wood of his musket. The weapon has not fired in weeks, yet it is kept clean, wiped down, oiled, cared for like an old friend. Sparrow is cool to the touch, and the sling creaks slightly as he shifts his weight. Around him, others do the same. In this strange, suspended world between battles, the instruments of war become objects of habit rather than violence. There is no glorification in them, only the understanding that this, too, is part of the pattern. As the morning light grows clearer, a letter arrives from the courier's pouch, crumpled, folded carefully, and marked with a wax seal softened by the cold. The soldier accepts it with a nod and retreats to the fire pit, where he warms his hands and carefully opens the paper. The handwriting is familiar, round loops, faint smudges, and a scent of lye soap that still clings faintly to the page. It's from his sister, perhaps, or a friend from the farm. The words are simple. The weather back home, the harvest stored, a new calf born, and a prayer that he'll come back before spring. He reads it slowly, not to savor the meaning, but to linger in the rhythm. The fire crackles beside him. Kettle hisses softly. His eyes scan the final lines, and he folds the letter with care, tucking it into the inner pocket of his coat, where the lining is softest and least worn. This moment, brief, unremarkable, becomes a kind of anchor. In a world reshaped by the grinding weight of distance and duty, it is these slender threads that tether a man gently to home as breakfast ends. Tin cups are stacked, ashes scattered, and the men begin to disperse toward their duties. Some are sent to split wood, others to patrol the nearby road, others still to carry messages down the line. The soldier, assigned to help gather feed for the mules, shoulders a sack and begins his slow walk across the frozen ground. The sun glimmers on patches of thin ice, and a light wind carries the scent of pine and dry grass through the air. Each step crunches softly beneath his boots, and the rhythm of walking becomes its own kind of solace. In the distance, a dog barks a stray that has followed the regiment for weeks, tolerated but not named. It darts between tents, chasing some imagined quarry, and disappears beyond the cook station. The soldier watches for a moment, amused, before continuing toward the supply shed. There is hay to be hauled, a harness to be mended, a latch to be fixed, tasks that feel ordinary and unremarkable, but which give the day its quiet scaffolding. By late morning, the camp has settled into its familiar hum. Voices rise and fall. Like wind in the trees, a hammer taps faintly against wood. Harmonica plays somewhere near the surgeon's tent, its notes slow, slightly off-key, and wandering. The soldier pauses near the wagons, resting his hands on his hips, and listens for a few breaths. The tune drifts into the air and disappears, unfinished. Later, back at his post, he sits again with his back against a tree stump, eyes closed, not quite asleep. The sun warms one side of his face, and he feels the hard edge of a button pressing gently against his ribs. His musket leans nearby, untouched. Time drips slowly through the leaves above. There is nothing pressing to do, and so he simply rests, thinking of nothing in particular, letting the wind move softly past him. These are the days that go unrecorded. The hours between commands and movements, between orders shouted and boots in motion. They are not glorious or tragic or bold. They are simply quiet. And yet, they are what most days were unfolding with soft repetition, marked by tasks so ordinary that history rarely remembers them. But it is in these details, the mending of straps, the steaming of coffee, the scratching of pencil on rough paper, that a soldier's life truly lived. The soldier does not know if this day will be his last quiet one, or merely another in a long procession of similar dawns. He does not wonder much about it. There is comfort in the present, in the routines that shape each sunrise into something manageable, even beautiful in its smallness. A field sparrow hops near his boot. He does not move, and you may find yourself imagining the texture of the coats, lining the weight of a musket laid carefully across the knees, the sharpness of morning air just before the sun fully lifts. In this picture, simple, grounded, and entirely human, there is no need for triumph or sorrow, only the steady passage of time, lived well and attentively. The letter in his coat pocket warms against his chest as he leans his head back and lets his eyes rest. The sky above is pale and wide, and somewhere, perhaps just beyond the ridgeline, the war continues to wait. But not here, not yet. It is early morning again, though the sun is slower today, hiding behind a veil of soft cloud. Its light, filtered, pale, and diffused. A cool mist clings to the ground, weaving between the low tents and stacks of supplies, like a forgotten memory that doesn't wish to leave. The earth is damp beneath the soldier's boots, but not muddy, more like a sponge that has held the weight of too many footfalls and too many seasons. Somewhere nearby, a gentle crackle rises, the sound of a campfire coaxed to life by gloved hands and patient breath. This is the quiet hour before orders are spoken. In this moment, you find yourself near the fire, crouched alongside a few others who have taken it upon themselves to prepare the morning meal. There is no formality to it, no chef, no recipes, no table. Just a blackened tin pot suspended above a flickering flame and a battered canvas sack opened to reveal a familiar pair. Coffee beans, ground roughly by hand, and hardtack, stacked in brittle, uneven squares. Hardtack is a name earned honestly. These biscuits, if one could call them, dar, hard, dry, and white, baked until they've lost all trace of softness. They are carried in satchels, wrapped in cloth, stuffed into pockets, and left there for days or weeks without complaint. If they chip a tooth or need to be soaked in broth to be edible, no one remarks upon it. They're reliable in their plainness, dependable in their lack of flavor. A soldier can eat them walking, marching, or resting, so they remain a constant companion. This morning, they are warmed gently by the fire. Not enough to soften them, but enough to take the edge off their cold. One soldier taps his hardtack against a rock, watching for movement. Sometimes, weevils are found burrowed within dead more often than alive. If discovered, they are brushed aside without much comment. In camp, disgust is a luxury few can afford. As the coffee begins to boil, a rich, bitter scent curls into the air. It is not the coffee of city parlors or southern plantations. There is no cream, no sugar, no porcelain cup. This is army brew, made in haste, poured from soot-stained pots into dented tin mugs. The canes have been crushed beneath a rifle butt, or between two rocks, and the grounds swim freely in the liquid like leaves in wind. But the smell, smoky, dark, and grounding, is more than enough. It rises above the cold and clings to woolen sleeves and coat collars, fusing the morning with a kind of earthy reassurance. A soldier hands you a cup, his fingers red from the cold, nails dark with grime. He doesn't speak, just nods and sits back down, pulling his blanket tighter around his shoulders. Others sip slowly, blowing on the surface before each drink. No one rushes. There is time yet before the drills begin. The soundscape here is modest and textured, the occasional pop from the fire, the scrape of spoon against cup, the crunch of hardtack as it cracks between teeth. There are no grand conversations, no shouted orders, just the low murmur of men exchanging remarks, too quiet to carry beyond the circle. The routine is almost sacred in its plainness, shared moment, repeated endlessly across camps, across seasons, across the long, weary years of the war. Beyond the fire, a kettle boils for those who prefer to steep pine needles into a kind of tea said to help with scurvy. The scent is sharp and green, a small reminder of forests left behind. Another pot holds salt pork, boiled until the fat floats in gray bubbles. The meat is rarely savored, but here and now, it's part of the ritual. Slices are carved off, set beside the biscuits, and eaten without ceremony. The mist begins to lift, ever so slightly. The outlines of rifles stacked in triangles come into view, their bayonets glinting faintly with moisture. A line of laundry, forgotten overnight, hangs stiff and motionless between two trees. A dog sniffs near the mess area, hoping for scraps, and is gently nudged away with a boot. Somewhere behind the tents, distant tap of a hammer suggests that someone is still reinforcing their shelter with extra slats of wood. Your cup is warm in your hands now. Metal, ridged, and thin. You tilt it toward your lips and let the bitter liquid touch your tongue. It is not pleasant. Not exactly, but it is strong. It wakes something behind your eyes, steadying rather than stirring, anchoring you in the moment. Round you, others do the same. There is a unity in the shared simplicity of it. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about this meal is how unremarkable it is. Yet, in its ordinariness lies its comfort. The quiet, repetitive nature of boiling water, of biting into a biscuit that tastes of little more than air and dust, becomes its own kind of ceremony. Here, breakfast is not a reward or a delight. It is a tether way of marking a time, of telling the body that it still belongs to the world. And as the fire settles into coals and the cups are rinsed with cold water, poured out onto the ground with slow tilts of the wrist, you might find yourself wondering how many mornings like this passed without record, without drama, without note. How many men across years and miles, sat with the same bitter cup and the same dry biscuit, watching the same mist lift from the same quiet trees. There is no answer needed. Only the hush of the wind in the branches and the faint warmth of tin against your palm. By mid-morning, the embers of the fire have dulled to a soft orange glow, and the kettle has been removed, emptied of its second boiling. The air is still touched with the bitter afterscent of overused coffee grounds and wet ash, but the warmth has sunk into the wool of coats and settled beneath fingernails. The soldier rises slowly, brushing crumbs of hardtack from his lap, and tightens the strap of his canteen, now filled again with the same black brew he drank earlier. He does not sip it now. That is, for later perhaps, during drill. Perhaps on a break, beside a hedgerow or a stone wall. The taste of the morning lingers on the tongue, not in the way of sweet memory, but like the residue of something necessary. Hardtack crumbles, leave a chalky film inside the mouth, and though the coffee washes it down, it doesn't quite erase it. Still, the soldier does not complain. There is no expectation of indulgence here, no sense of missing out. In fact, within the bounds of this life, the simple act of eating beside a fire and holding something warm is enough to root the body and slow the mind. A second soldier, older by a decade and marked by the lines around his eyes, begins to recount. A memory not a dramatic one, just the story of a biscuit too hard to bite and the inventive decision to soak it overnight in rainwater. The men around him nod. Some smile softly, but no one laughs aloud. Their stories have been shaped to fit the silence of their company, and even humor arrives gently, without disruption. Okay. He holds up a piece of his current ration and knocks it against a rock. Clicks like bone. Clicks is accepted as normal. Elsewhere, in the camp, a young recruit experiments with his morning ration, trying to soften the hardtack by holding it close to the steam of the fire. The edges turn damp, but remain resistant. Another tries scraping the surface with a knife, reducing it to crumbs to mix with the remnants of pork grease. It becomes a paste, vaguely resembling a porridge. He eats it without fanfare, spooning it from the blade of his knife. His movements are slow, careful, absent of appetite, but not of intention. Throughout the Civil War, hardtack and coffee formed the culinary axis of soldierly life. While salt pork and dried beans made appearances in camp fare, it was these two constants that defined the rhythm of consumption. Quartermasters distributed the rations in canvas sacks or wooden crates, often long before the goods had a chance to grow stale, which meant that by the time they reached the men in the field, they had hardened into something beyond bread. The joke among the ranks was that some of the hardtack had seen earlier wars. There were ways to adapt. Some soldiers would crumble their biscuit into a tin and pour hot water over it, softening it into a kind of soup. Others toasted the cracker over an open flame, though it would more often char than warm through. A few men with a bit of bacon fat might fry their rations in pans borrowed from the cook's wagon, creating a dish sometimes known as skilligali. There was no illusion of variety, only resourcefulness. The coffee, on the other hand, was held in a different regard. While never luxurious, it was viewed with something like reverence. The act of brewing became a shared meditational moment of collective pause. Soldiers hoarded their rations, bartered for extra beans, hand ground them by hand using stones, the back of a hatchet, or even the heel of a boot. When fires were forbidden on the march, some men carried embers in canteens or tin boxes to preserve a flame. There were a few comforts, but among them, promise of coffee was one of the most steady. Sometimes the soldiers added crushed acorns or toasted rye to stretch the grounds. Others steeped chicory root, a southern habit adopted more often out of necessity than choice. The flavor was different, woodier, thinner, but still warm, still familiar. Each version had its own ritual, its own motion of stirring, of holding, of passing the cup around the circle, As the soldier sets down his empty mug, he listens to the sound of a nearby ladle scraping the bottom of the last pot. The fire has mired, dimmed. The kettle is blackened with soot, its handle wrapped in cloth to protect from the heat. The cups, if not immediately rinsed, will soon bear a coat of residue that smells of smoke and metal. One by one, the men move away from the circle, stretching their legs, adjusting their belts. Some pulling gloves tighter, others rolling their sleeves. A pair of mules snort near the quartermaster's wagon, shifting their weight on frost-stiffened earth. The soldier walks past them and rests his hand against the side of the wagon, letting his fingers trail across the grain of the wood. There's a burlap sack resting near the back, another supply of hardtack, barely opened. He doesn't reach for it. No need. Breakfast has passed. The day lies ahead like a long, slow march. As he turns back, the taste of coffee still flickers faintly on his breath, and the feeling of warmth in his fingers, though fading, seems to echo the fire's brief embrace. There is no promise of a better meal, nor fear of worse, just the knowledge that tomorrow or the next day, the same bitter cup and brittle square will be waiting, unremarkable, undramatic, but quietly reliable. And perhaps there is something soothing in that thought, that in a world shifting with noise and smoke and uncertainty, there remains a biscuit to chew, a cup to hold, and a fire to sit beside. The day presses gently onward, and the remains of the morning fire are little more than glowing coals now, surrounded by darkened stones and ash-edged soil. The tin cups have been rinsed and hung from belt loops, still damp, leaving faint spots on the fabric of uniform trousers. A few pieces of half-eaten hardtack lie scattered near the fire pit, some returned to the earth, some saved for later. The camp doesn't grow louder, but it settles deeper into motion. Boots moving over pine needles, the creak of tent ropes tightening with the breeze, and the soft clang of canteens brushing against belt buckles. The soldier finds himself returning to his post with a quiet mind. The breakfast, however simple, has grounded the morning. His satchel is a little heavier now, not with food, but with the presence of having eaten, of having shared a moment with others beneath the same sky. There is no particular feeling, no pride, no joy, only a gentle sense of continuity, as though the small act of breaking dry biscuit and sipping hot brew was enough to stitch today to yesterday, in this camp, to the one before it. A young recruit, barely past boyhood, passes him carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. The shape inside reveals itself, hardtack, of course, but softened with boiled molasses, a rare treat left from a previous supply run. The boy offers a nod and continues on, his boots scraping softly as he moves downhill. The soldier watches for a moment, then resumes his walk, noting how the air has warmed just slightly. A thin breeze brushes past, carrying the scent of distant smoke and sun-warmed canvas. In a small clearing beyond the tents, a soldier kneels near a fallen log, carving the date into its bark with the careful edge of a penknife. It's not an act of defiance, or record merely a way to mark the passage of time in a place where days can blend like mist across a still river. Few others sit nearby, mending worn seams or rewrapping their feet in strips of cloth. They speak only when needed, but their silence is easy, shared and unbothered. The routines of the morning meal stretch forward into tasks of maintenance and patience. A canteen is recorked, a musket's flint is checked, its barrel cleaned with oil and cloth. The soldier, now seated beneath a bare-limbed walnut tree, adjusts the buttons on his coat. One has come loose at the shoulder, and he fingers the thread, absently, making a mental note to borrow a needle from the quartermaster's assistant later in the day. Such repairs are seldom urgent, but always important. No bugle call comes today, no marching orders, no announcement of movement. The men remain in camp, and the morning lingers like a low hum. It is in these kinds of days that the coffee becomes more than just a drink. It becomes a rhythm, a touch point, a ritual of grounding. The memory of its steam, of its bite against the tongue, is carried like a faint warmth in the chest. It softens the noise of uncertainty, anchors the body to something real and graspable. Later, just after midday, the soldier retrieves a small notebook from his haversack, cloth-bound thing, with pages curled at the corners and faint ink stains across its spine. He doesn't write about battle or honor or hardship. He writes about the coffee, about the way it smelled after the first pour, the way the heat clung to the rim of the mug, and how it tasted more like earth than bean. He writes the word bitter and underlines it once, not in complaint, but as a simple truth. He writes, too, of the hardtack, not as a curse, but as a companion. He draws a sketch of it in the corner of the page, square, uneven, with its 5 holes marked out like the spots on dice. He notes that today's biscuit was less cracked than yesterday's, and that it held up well to soaking in broth. No poetry, no embellishment, just the plain record of a morning passed without hunger, a success in its own quiet way. As evening approaches, the fire pits are prepared once more. A soldier tosses in a handful of twigs, and the crackling sound stirs memory. The smell of old coffee lingers faintly in the pot, still resting nearby. There's talk of brewing another round, not for warmth this time, but for comfort, to ease the settling night and give the hands something to do. The tin cups are brought out again, and someone jokes softly about rationing the grounds like gold dust. No one laughs, but there is a shared, quiet smile. The soldier holds his cup again, empty for now, but not yet washed. His fingers trace the rim, remembering the warmth, the way the steam curled into his face that morning. A simple cup, a dry biscuit, a fire. That was all. And yet it was enough to soften the cold, to remind him that the day was his to shape, however gently, in this small corner of the war. The battle was not with rifles or cannon, but with sameness, discomfort, and waiting. And somehow, the slow, ritual of breakfast, the sound of boiling water, the snap of biscuit, the holding of warmth in the hands, became a quiet form of resilience, way of saying, without words, we are still here. And as the sun dips low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the camp, you might find yourself imagining the weight of a cup in your hands, the grain of hard bread against your teeth, the scent of bitter grounds and wet wool rising into the air. There is no great moment here, no charge, no song, only the slow unfolding of another day, marked by the simplest of meals, and somehow, that is more than enough. It begins with a rustle, not a shout. A quiet shuffling of hands over canvas and wool, as the men in camp slowly take to the morning's task. Orders have come, marching orders, not shouted in haste, but passed down in soft clusters, as if the movement itself were a natural change in season. The air is still cool, the fire pits faintly smoldering from the breakfast hour just past. Now, attention turns to the packs, to the knapsacks, blanket rolls, and haversacks that must be sorted, filled, tightened, and slung. You're there, seated on a stump, still slick with the morning dew, watching as a soldier kneels beside his spread-out gear. The contents are few, but each piece must be carefully placed. His blanket, coarse and worn, lies folded on one side. A pair of woolen socks, darned several times at the heel weights beside a flannel shirt. There is a shaving kit, its contents rattling softly within a tin case. It's a battered comb with missing teeth, a candle stub wrapped in oiled paper, a length of twine. Each item is familiar, not in the way of prized possessions, but like the tools of a trade performed daily. Without pride and without complaint, he moves slowly, not because of hesitation, but from the practiced rhythm of someone who's done this many times before. His fingers, calloused and pink from the cold, Gather the edges of the blanket, fold it with precision, and roll it tight into a cylinder. A leather strap, dark with age and sweat, holds the roll in place. It is not heavy, but it will ride on his shoulders for many miles, and so it must not shift or sag. He runs his thumb along the edge to test the tuck, then sets it aside. The knapsack, made of rough, black canvas, opens with a creak of leather and metal. Inside goes the extra shirt, the socks, the shaving kit, and a pouch of hard biscuit tucked near the back. He slips in a bundle of letters tied with blue string. No need to read them now. Their weight is familiar. Atop it all rests a tin plate and cup, nested together, still bearing the soot marks of last night's fire. A final glance, then the flap is buckled, straps adjusted, and the sack placed upright beside him. All around the camp, others are doing the same. The cadence of preparation is soft, filled with the sounds of linen brushing wool, buckles being cinched, and a quiet grunt of effort as gear is hoisted and settled into place. There are no raised voices. Each man has learned, over months of movement, that loudness wastes energy. The march will be long, and silence is the first way to preserve strength. There is a rhythm to the packing. What must be carried on the back? What can be tucked into a haversack slung at the side? And what is stowed in pockets or wrapped in handkerchiefs? A bar of soap, wrapped in brown paper, is slipped into a corner. A pouch of tobacco, tied with string, fits into a coat pocket where it will be easy to reach on the road. Some men carry a spoon tied to a buttonhole with twine. Others tuck a Bible between 2 layers of flannel for safekeeping. And always, there is the decision, what to leave behind. A broken comb, a sock too far gone to mend, an extra tin plate that rattles when you walk. A man stares at a piece of charcoal sketching he'd done weeks ago. His attempt at capturing the line of distant trees at dawn end folds it gently before setting it aside. The march doesn't make room for sentiment. It's only necessity. The blanket roll is hoisted and slung diagonally across the chest, resting over the opposite shoulder like a sash. It rubs, always, in the same spot, wearing a faint shine into the wool. Coat beneath. The knapsack comes next. Its straps drawn tight against the collarbone, its weight settling in just below the shoulder blades. Adjustments are made teeny ones, with jerks of the elbow and the shifting of hips. The soldier breathes in, then out, letting his body accept the familiar burden. Farther off, a sergeant walks among the rows of men, saying little. His presence is reminder enough. The pace is calm, but constant. Some men double-check their cartridge, BOXES, running a fingertip along the edge of the flap. Others count their caps or rewrap their powder in oilskin. It's not out of fear, just habit, honed by the repetition of days that blend into each other. In the distance, the wagons are being loaded tents. Extra provisions, wooden crates of ammunition, spades, and cooking implements. The mule drivers whistle softly as they adjust harnesses and stack crates. Horses snort, stamping their hooves into the dirt. And officers on foot pass among the ranks, checking for stragglers, noting which men limp, which need a moment longer to ready themselves. Back, where you sit, the soldier stands at last. His gear is in place. His hands, now empty, brush once over his chest, checking for the familiar shapes. Cup, cartridge box, knife. He adjusts the brim of his forage cap and looks briefly at the sky. No words, it's just the pale gray above and the quiet scent of pine, rising from the warming forest floor. There is something soothing about the care taken with such ordinary things. No rush, no fanfare, just the steady assembling of what is needed, of what can be carried, what must be borne. And as you sit with him in this moment, listening to the rustle of wool, creak of canvas, and the steady breath drawn through half-parted lips, you may wonder what it is to carry a life on one's back, to choose which fragments of home, of comfort, of self, be wrapped into a blanket roll and marched into the unknown. It's not a question that seeks an answer, only a quiet space in which to rest. A pause before the boots begin to fall in time. The hour of departure draws near, though no drum has yet been struck and no line fully formed. In these last moments before movement, there is stillness, but not idleness. The soldier takes one final turn through his small portion of the camp. Not out of nostalgia, but practicality. He scans the ground for anything left behind. A tin spoon near the fire pit, stray glove half hidden beneath a pine bough, a rolled sock that had fallen. In the night, he picks them up with quiet precision, brushing off bits of ash and leaf. The glove is not his. He lays it gently on a nearby stump, in case its owner comes looking elsewhere. Few men take advantage of these final quiet minutes to shift the balance of their load. A soldier squats beside his knapsack and unties the flap, adjusting the fold of a blanket that had slipped sideways. Another repacks his cartridge box after discovering a loose cap. These are not frantic gestures, but careful ones, learning through trial in the soft discipline of repeated motion. The blanket roll, slung across the chest, has a way of settling as the body warms. Pulls slightly on the left shoulder, urging the wearer to lean without meaning to. The soldier adjusts it now with a practiced shrug and tug, then slips his hand beneath the strap to ease the pressure. His movements are calm, habitual, even graceful in their economy. The march ahead is uncertain, as all marches are. It may last 2 days or 10. It may end in another camp or in a skirmish barely worth recording. The soldier does not speculate. He thinks only of weight of what he can carry and for how long. Every item has been chosen for function: wool for warmth, tin for durability, leather for strength. Nothing for decoration, nothing without use. The sensory world narrows in these moments. It's a feel of rough wool against the back of the neck. Leather strap worn smooth at the edges by months of touch. The faint metallic scent of black powder that lingers in the seams of the cartridge box. The quiet taste of ash still resting on the tongue from the morning's coffee. A world reduced to touch and scent and weight. Some men tuck pieces of home into their packs. A letter folded many times over, now soft at the creases. A photograph pressed between 2 pages of a Bible. A button sewn from a sister's dress. Tease. Objects do not weigh much, but they are heavy in another way. Still, the soldier does not linger on his. He checks that it is tucked safely in the inner pocket of his coat. Then fastens the button above it with care. The march begins, not with a shout, but with a rippling officer passing between lines, speaking softly, motioning forward. Boots shift. A cough here, the rustle of gear there. One by one, men rise, shoulders settling under the familiar burden. The soldier stands, adjusting his cap against the light. He lifts his haversack over one shoulder, then takes hold of his musket, the wood worn smooth beneath his palm. The column will form slowly, in order, winding between trees and down rutted paths marked by the passage of previous companies. The road ahead may be dry and firm or muddied from a recent rain. The soldier doesn't wonder which. Whatever lies ahead will be walked one step at a time, with no thought wasted on what cannot be changed. The pace of marching is slow, but steady. When the time comes, the soldier will fall into it without thinking. It's the sound of dozens of feet pressing into dirt, the low clatter of tin against tin, the soft shuffle of cloth rubbing against itself. All of it creates a rhythm as ancient as war. Not a drum beat, but a kind of communal breathing, each man part of a long, moving line. There's a certain artistry to packing for such a life. Every item has its place. The mess tin must lie flat against the back so it doesn't shift and bruise. The cup, if hung too low, will strike the knee. Fork must be tied or wrapped, lest it rattle. The shirt must be folded tight to cushion the bony protrusion of the spine where the pack sits. These are not rules taught in manuals, but passed from man to man, shaped by bruises and blisters, adjusted after miles of trial. Even the arrangement of straps matters. A twist in the shoulder tie can press a crease into the skin that will sting for hours. The soldier pulls at his now, straightening it with a roll of the shoulder and a slight turn of the neck. The movement is small, but brings immediate relief. Nearby, a companion does the same, and the two exchange a glance of quiet understanding. No words are needed. In the distance, a single crow calls out from a dead branch, then takes flight. The wind picks up gently, catching the edges of loose tent flaps, snapping them with soft slaps. The fire pits cool behind them, the smoke thinning to gray whispers. Soon, the camp will be empty, but for the remains of ash and footprints. The soldier takes one last look around, searching for anything, just marking the scene. The trees, the slope of the ground, the way the frost still clings to shaded tufts of grass. He commits it all to memory, though he may never think of it again. Then, with a soft sigh, he steps forward into place, and in this moment, as the line begins to stretch and move, you may find yourself wondering, how did it feel to walk with everything you owned bound tight against your spine, to carry not just weight, but identity, function, survival, all arranged in layers of fabric and leather? Perhaps it was tiring. Perhaps it was simply routine. For perhaps, in the act of packing, there was a kind of order that brought a measure of calm that there is no need to answer, only to walk quietly beside him, one step at a time. The column now moves, quiet and long, like a slow stream shaped by the land. Boots settle into old wheel ruts. Musket barrels gleam in faint streaks, where the trees break the sky, and the soldiers' packs creak faintly with every step. The path is narrow and lined with dry leaves, still crisp despite the damp earth beneath. Now and then, a twig snaps beneath a heel, or the call of a bird punctuates the stillness, but mostly, there is just the sound of men moving, weighted, steady, and calm. The soldier's pack rests evenly now, the blanket rolled firm across his chest, knapsack snug against his back. He can feel the press of the tin cup to the outer flap and the soft bulge of the extra shirt near the base. There is comfort in this weight, not ease, but familiarity. 8 is a burden, chosen, arranged, and accepted. The ache at the shoulders will come, as it always does, but not yet. For now, there is only rhythm as the march stretches into its first hour. The scenery slips past in small, quiet increments. A bend in the trail reveals a creek, low and sluggish, with a single heron perched beside it. The men do not stop, but many glance toward the water, some with longing, others with indifference. The soldier does not think of drinking. His canteen is half full with boiled coffee from the morning. Lukewarm now, but the taste is still there. A faint, bitter warmth when needed. The blanket roll has begun to settle more firmly with each step. The strap pulling faintly across the front of the chest. A soft pinch develops near the collarbone. The soldier shifts slightly, redistributing the pull. It's not painful, only present a reminder of the miles to come. The road ahead is not steep, but it rises gently, lined by red clay banks and scattered pine. The scent of crushed needles lifts briefly with the breeze. Midday comes with no announcement. Only the angle of light changes, casting longer shadows through the canopy. A brief halt is called, not rest, not meal, just pause. The men stop where they are easing their packs to the ground with soft thumps. No one sits unless a log is near. The soldier chooses to stand, resting his musket upright and leaning against it. He stretches one arm across his chest, then the other, working out the early stiffness. His back is damp with sweat, and steam curls faintly from the collar of his coat. This is the time to check the straps, spit, to tighten one, loosen another, retie the blanket roll if it has slipped. Companion nearby has lost a button from his knapsack. Flap, and the soldier reaches into his pocket, offering a spare. They say little as the button is passed, but the exchange is understood. It is one of hundreds they've made before: borrowed string, a shared wedge of salt pork, a turn holding the mess tin over the fire. The break ends quickly. Boots are lifted, gear is hoisted, and the line flows again. The pack resumes its rightful place, settling into the familiar groove along the soldier's spine. The blanket roll thumps gently with each pace, but he no longer notices. His mind begins to drift, as it often does during long marches, not to home or war or endings, but to small things: the angle of a tree limb, the sound of leaves underfoot, the sight of a squirrel darting between roots. In this drifting time bends. The miles pass without fanfare, just the soft repetition of step after step. The soldier knows his pack by feel now, each bump and fold, the way it rides when he leans or straightens. He knows the faint rattle of the tin plate when the strap loosens, and the warm pressure of the letters in the inner pocket. These sensations anchor him, reminding him that he is still here, still moving. And perhaps this is where the comfort lies, not in the idea of destination, but in the carrying. In the arrangement of ordinary things, assembled with care and borne with quiet resolve. The pack is not just burden, it is identity. It holds his food, his shelter, his tools, his voice when ink and paper allow it. It is both shield and shadow, marking him as part of 1,000 others, yet wholly his own. By late afternoon, the trail begins to flatten, and a clearing appears ahead. There is no talk of camp yet, but the signs are the widening of space, the appearance of scouts returning along the path, the scent of distant fires already lit by the forward guard. The soldier shifts his shoulders once more, already preparing to unsling the straps when the halt is called. When the time comes, it happens gently. The line slows, then stills. A murmur moves backward from the front. The packs are slid down, not dropped, but laid carefully on the grass. The blanket roll is unbuckled, unwrapped, fluffed, and folded. Tents will be pitched, fires built, water drawn, but for now, just a moment to breathe. The soldier kneels beside his gear, opens a flap, and retrieves the cup. He pours the last of the lukewarm coffee into it and drinks slowly, letting the taste settle again in his throat. Around him, others do the same, removing boots, rubbing shoulders, adjusting bandages, cleaning weapons. These are not tasks of urgency, but of rhythm, the quiet labor of sustaining life on the road, as the shadows lengthen and the sun dips low behind the trees. The soldier smooths his blanket against the ground. The pack, now emptied of its burden, leans against a nearby log. He sits beside it, resting his back against its shape, and watches the smoke rise from a cook fire. There will be supper soon, beans perhaps, or pork and biscuit, but for now, there is just this moment. And in that stillness, you might wonder, was there peace in this? In the repetition of loading and unloading, of folding the same blanket, tying the same knots, walking the same quiet roads. Perhaps the peace was not in the destination, but in the motion itself. In knowing that each day would begin with the same few objects packed in the same way, carried with the same strength, and as night gathers, wrapping the trees in soft darkness. The soldier leans his head against the roll of wool and closes his eyes. The day's march held gently in his bones. Nothing grand, nothing tragic, just the weight of a pack, the warmth of a blanket, and the hush of another day ended in stillness. It is a late afternoon in the Carolinas, sometime in the second summer of the war. The sun hangs low, its golden light softened by drifting clouds, and the lingering haze of dust stirred by marching feet. In a clearing edged by pine and magnolia, A Confederate camp has settled into a moment of stillness. Not sleep, nor rest, just the kind of quiet that follows days without movement. Tents sag slightly in the warmth, canvas edges lifting with the breeze. Bedrolls lie undisturbed, mess kits rinsed and drying, and beyond the main line of tents, a handful of men sit or squat with needle and thread in hand. Among them is a soldier gray-coated, though the fabric has faded with wear to something more like the color of ash or riverstone. His knees are drawn up, one trouser leg rolled to the thigh. He holds a strip of cloth, the same coarse homespun from which his uniform is made, and matches it against a rent at the knee. With careful hands, he threads a bone needle, the point worn smooth from repeated use, and begins to stitch. Uniform repair is not a duty, but a necessity. There's no supply train full of spare jackets, no bins of buttons or bolts of regulation wool. Each man wears what he has and keeps it serviceable as long as possible. A tear left unrepaired will widen. A missing button means a flap that no longer stays closed, and in a world where each item carried must be earned, patched, and carried again, there is no such thing as minor damage. The fabric is stiff, especially at the seams, where salt from sweat and long days of wear has hardened it. The needle resists, and the thread pulled from a spool kept in a tobacco tink chest slightly on the frayed edge. But the soldier is patient, works without hurry, his brows knit not in frustration, but in concentration. His stitches are uneven, but firm. They hold all around him. Others are engaged in the same quiet ritual. One man resues a coat button using a scrap of black waxed thread pulled from a broken shoelace. Another turns his cap inside out and adds a few reinforcing stitches at the crown. There is no conversation, save for the occasional request passed softly, "You got any extra thread? Or pass me that thimble when you're done." The thimble in question is carved from wood, smooth at the rim, passed from hand to hand like a shared tool in a workshop. The setting is modest, no tables, no chairs. Most work seated on the ground or on overturned crates. Few have spread blankets beneath them to keep the pine needles from scratching their legs. There is no pretense of cleanliness. Fingers are stained with ash and sweat, nails dark with soil. Yet, despite this, the movements are precise, almost delicate. Each stitch made is one less problem on the march. The light fades slowly, casting long shadows over the fabric. The soldier squints slightly, turning the cloth in his hands to catch what sunlight remains. He pinches the fabric between his thumb and forefinger and gently pulls the thread through with a long, measured draw. The sound is soft, a gentle zip of fiber against fiber. He knots the end tightly, biting the thread between his teeth to snap it off. Uniforms in the Confederate ranks were not uniform at all. Early in the war, men wore what they brought from home: brown jackets, black hats, dyed shirts, stitched by sisters or wives. Some arrived in their Sunday best, others in shirt sleeves and suspenders. Over time, standard issues were promised, but rarely delivered. Cloth was scarce, thread even more so. Many uniforms were fashioned by local seamstresses or community sewing circles, each with their own patterns and variations. This inconsistency led to a patchwork appearance in camp. Trousers dyed different shades of butternut or gray, jackets with collars too wide, cuffs too tight, caps with mismatched brims. But there was pride in these garments, especially in their upkeep. To wear a clean, well-mended uniform, even one made from homespun, was a quiet declaration of self-respect, a signal that, despite hardship and scarcity, care still had a place. The soldier finishes the repair on his knee and smooths the fabric with his palm. The stitches are visible but tight. He stands slowly, stretching his legs, and tests the seam by squatting once, then standing again. Satisfied, he rolls the trouser leg down and fastens the button at the cuff. His hands move next to his sleeve, where a tear has frayed just above the elbow. He will patch that too, but not tonight. The light is fading too fast. Nearby, a man threads 2 strips of fabric together for a comrade whose coat tore on a march last week. He sews in silence, then passes the garment back. No thanks are exchanged. The gratitude is understood. A gentle breeze lifts the smoke from the cook fire, and the scent of boiling beans mingles with pine, sap, and sweat. The soldier gathers his few tools, a small pair of scissors, spone needle, the tin of thread, and folds them into a square of cloth. He slips the bundle into his haversack, tucking it beside a carved pipe and a flint. His fingers linger for a moment on the flap, as if to confirm everything is in its place. And as you sit beside him in this quiet hour, watching the firelight flicker across rough hands and worn fabric, may begin to sense what such work meant. It was not the mending of clothes, but the maintenance of order in a life made jagged by war. A small, steady effort against the fray. A question might stir gently in your thoughts: how many uniforms were stitched by firelight? Their seams made strong, not by skill, but by repetition and care. How many threads were drawn through cloth as the crickets sang and the smoke drifted slowly toward the stars? No answer is needed. Only the hush of the evening and the weight of fabric held gently in the lap. Night has fully fallen now. The heat of the day has retreated into the earth, and a mild coolness rests in its place. Round the camp, the men have drawn their coats closer, the coarse wool heavy with wear, and yet somehow still offering comfort. The soldier, who earlier repaired, the tear at his knee, now sits beside a low burning fire, his legs crossed, a piece of cloth stretched across his lap. This time it is not his own coat he holds, but a friend's one who pulled guard duty earlier and left it behind with a quiet word and a tired smile. The stitching is slower now. The light flickers, uneven and golden, throwing long shadows that move across his hands. He threads the needle again, squinting to guide it through the eye. The thread is a pale tan, salvaged from an old feed sack and waxed with the stub of a candle to prevent fraying. It doesn't match the fabric, but that hardly matters. In this war, repair is not for show, it is survival. The coat's cuff has begun to come apart at the seam. Too many days of adjusting sleeves, too many nights of sleeping on the ground, with the arm curled beneath the head. The soldier works quietly, looping the thread through again and again, tucking the raw edge beneath the existing stitch line. He hums a tune under his breath, something half remembered, wordless now. The sound is low, rhythmic, and blends with the soft crackle of the fire. Elsewhere in the camp, the same scene plays out. A man mends a knapsack strap using wire pulled from a discarded sardine tin. Another repairs the brim of his hat with twine and a bent needle, pressing the cloth between 2 pieces of board to hold it steady. No one calls attention to the work being done. The sounds of repair thread pulled taut, cloth torn clean, Putnam sonar as much a part of the evening as the insects and the distant hoot of an owl, somewhere near the edge of the camp. Men sit back to back, stitching opposite legs of a blanket torn on the last march. They pass the needle between them with practiced ease, never speaking, just nodding when the handoff comes. They work in tandem, the fabric pulled tight across their knees. When the patch is finished, they test its strength by pulling gently from each end. Satisfied, they fold the blanket neatly and drape it over a rock to air in the night breeze. The Confederate uniform, often thought of as a symbol, was, in truth, a living thing, adapted, altered, repaired, and remade until its original form was nearly lost, homespun and dyed in vats behind farmhouses, cut from old coats or pieced together from civilian garments. No two were ever quite the same. The term gray was generous. Some were brown, others nearly blue, and many more somewhere in between. But within the camp, each thread mattered. A man might wear the same trousers for a year or more, patching the seat with canvas from a tent flap or stitching the hem with the string from a tobacco pouch. Coat passed down from an older brother might be refitted by taking in the sides or by resewing the cuffs to match regulation, if one even had the means to care. In truth, no one complained much. To have a whole uniform, no matter how patched or sun-faded, was to be lucky. The soldier finishes his second repair of the evening and holds the sleeve up to the firelight. The stitches gleam faintly, straight and firm. He rubs the seam between thumb and finger, feeling the smooth line of waxed thread. Then he folds the coat gently, not like a tailor, but like someone wrapping something valuable. He sets it aside on a small wooden crate and leans back, stretching his fingers toward the warmth of the coals. Beside him, another man chuckles quietly as he tries to stitch a missing flap back onto his cartridge box. The leather is stiff and uncooperative, the needle reluctant to pierce it. The soldier offers a small iron awl from his haversack, its handle worn smooth. The gesture is accepted with a nod, and no further words are exchanged. In these camps, help is given often and spoken of rarely. The fire burns low. Sparks rise now and again, drifting into the night air like soft stars. Above, the sky has opened into a velvet blue, the stars beginning to peek through the thin veil of clouds. Crickets chirp from beyond the ring of tents, their voices steady and unhurried. The camp settles, repairs slow. Some fold their work away, tucking needles into cloth wraps and spools into tobacco tins. Others pause mid-stitch, letting their hands rest as they listen to the quiet around them. The scent of the evening is layered, pine needles underfoot, wool warmed by the body, faint smoke curling from the last coals. There is something tender in the simplicity of it, all the gentle hum of work done not for glory, but for function. A missing button means a coat flaps open during rain. A torn seam lets cold air in at dawn. To mend is to prepare, is to stitch, is to care. And as you sit with the soldier now, in this pool of soft firelights, surrounded by figures bowed in silent concentration, you may wonder how many hours like this unfolded during a long war. How many evenings were filled not with chaos or cannon, but with thread, patience, and steady hands, perhaps more than history ever recorded. The question may linger in your thoughts, gently,